You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Black Friday, everyone. I am Steven Willis, the host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to have John Macon Gillespie in just a second. This is the Ole Miss versus Mississippi State pregame live show. And I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Indeed. This is a big game for Ole Miss, and we're going to bring in John Macon Gillespie about everything that's going on. He's heading over to Oxford in about an hour. This is a game I do not expect, even though Trey Harris is not listed as out as of the last availability report. I do not expect Trey Harris. Isaiah Hartrop all of a sudden popped up as probable. I don't know how much he is going to play today, if any, but he was a receiver that was brought into the transfer portal a year ago as well, but he's been out essentially all season. Logan Diggs is listed as questionable. This is a game that Ole Miss needs to win convincingly. I don't want to say blow out because of the connotations of that, but they need a convincing win to prevent a win that they need of South Carolina beating Clemson, but not jumping them.
Yeah, it's a really complicated situation if you're looking at it from a playoff perspective. Now, obviously, I kind of said this on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it now, on Tuesday night, that I don't think 14 is a great spot for Ole Miss right now, because a lot's got to happen, I think, for Ole Miss to get back into that field, which, I mean, we kind of knew that when they lost to Florida
and
last
Kentucky.
week.
You lost to Kentucky. I mean,
right.
It
is what it is at this point. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it is worth talking about because, I mean, I do think that the potential is still theoretically there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if you want to talk about how Ole Miss gets to the playoff, I mean, you've got to, like you said, convincingly beat Mississippi State today. That's what's in your control. If you're Ole Miss, that's what you have to do today. And then there are some things that have to happen above you. You know, what I like to kind of refer to as just straight up chaos. Essentially, you have to root for a lot of chaos for Ole Miss to get its way back into that top 12. And but yeah, the first step is convincingly beating Mississippi State today to the point where South Carolina won't jump you if they manage to beat Clemson. I believe that game's tomorrow, right? That one's not today.
That's the noon game. That's at the same time as Tennessee and Vanderbilt. So that's two games that are pretty meaningful if Ole Miss can convincingly win the game today.
Yeah. So I mean that's what needs to happen right now. Is the Black Friday goal for Ole Miss is simply convincingly beat Mississippi State, and then tomorrow you can kind of worry about the rest of the stuff that's going on. But yeah, you know, I'll argue, and you know, you and I both being native Mississippians, this game means something even if Ole Miss doesn't get into the playoff. I mean, I always take that stance. You know, there are some who, and I get it. There are some who will argue that it's just another game, which in a sense it kind of is some years, but rivalry games to me, regardless of whether it's this one or not, always have a little extra meaning behind them. So that's, you know, that's kind of the stance I take on today for sure.
I've been inside that building for multiple years under multiple staffs. This game means something different than other games. They act differently for this game than even the LSU game, than even the Arkansas game. All those other rivalries, they don't act like they do for Mississippi State. And that is behind closed doors. That is like giving somebody a compliment when you don't expect anything in return. They're doing it when nobody's watching. So that tells me what this game actually means. And you mentioned on Twitter the other day, the last time Ole Miss beat Mississippi State in the Navy Strip, and I immediately knew the answer to that, but that was the 2008 absolutely blowout Egg Bowl. The last time that Ole Miss had a defensive line comparable to this one, it was 45-0, and Mississippi State had like negative 80 yards of rushing in that game.
Yeah, it was insane. I remember that game. That one, I can't remember if that was a Black Friday or if that was an early Saturday game.
I think that was a Black Friday game.
It may have been a Black Friday game. So, I mean, it's kind of strange how stuff like that kind of lines up sometimes. But obviously the last time, and this obviously doesn't mean anything, But the last time Ole Miss wore this uniform combination against Mississippi State was the 2-point loss in 2022. But these are two different teams than came out on the field that season, and I think it's a little bit different storylines, behind this game as well. So I don't know. I'm a uniform geek, that, but that's something that kind of came to my mind was that the last time Ole Miss won in this uniform combination was that 2008 Houston Nutt good year, essentially.
And I think the 22 game was the only time they've worn it since then.
From what I can remember, yes, unless there was another one under Nutt. I'll have to go back and look. Unless there was another one under Nutt when the team was, dead, essentially.
Yeah. We'll have to see how it looks, like the 2010 game, what that looked like.
Yeah.
But I do respect the fact, and I will give Lane Kiffin all the credit in the world, that he brought back David Cutcliffe's big game blue that he had back in the early 2000s. And Ole Miss always wears navy at home against Mississippi State. Now, in 2020, it was white pants, not gray pants, but it was still the navy jerseys. And Ole Miss on the road wears traditionals at Mississippi State. It's not white pants. It's not anything weird. It is going to be absolutely traditional uniforms. And I respect that about Lane Kiffin on a team that uniform changes have been a thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I had not really put that together, but I guess you're right with the David Cutcliffe thing. For sure. I mean, that's a good point. But yeah, it is interesting that we've seen over the last few years there being certain matchups that you can kind of guess what Ole Miss is going to wear. I kind of figured they would wear this week because it's kind of what has evolved into being under Lane Kiffin. And I think it's good. I mean, I think for these bigger games or these rivalry games, I guess in this case, I think that it's good to lean into that for sure because there's a lot of history behind this game. I think this is the 121st meeting between these two schools. That's a long time. That's a lot of games, and for a lot of those games, Ole Miss will have been wearing what it's wearing today.
Yeah, and LSU this year, Ole Miss wore the traditional reds with the navy helmet. So, again, all respect to Lane Kiffin for getting Ole Miss to the point to where they're wearing traditional uniforms against these teams. I think that the uniform they wore against LSU, they should wear it every single year, regardless of what's going on, whether you're at LSU or at home, since you wear home jerseys anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, that's what most of us who were around that rivalry, the Magnolia Bowl, what's now the Magnolia Bowl, for pretty much all of our lives. I mean, that's kind of what we grew up seeing was that uniform against LSU's traditional thing on the field. So, yeah, I think it's good. And I don't remember. I think State's wearing all white today, something like that. So, I mean,
I think they're wearing gold helmet decals, by the way. They're bringing that back. This two-win Mississippi
rumors about that.
Yeah, I've heard rumors about that they're going to break out that gold stuff with a 2-win football team.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I guess you kind of do.
Well, it worked once. I guess that worked once under Mullen. They're trying to recreate the magic and do all that again.
Well, and something to try to get some people invested a little bit more, because I feel like some fans on both sides of this year are not as invested as they typically would be in a game like this.
The fan engagement on Twitter this week has been honestly pretty sad.
It's been very different for sure.
Yeah,
like I mean, it's been way different. So and I think that comes from the fact that Ole Miss has had obviously had a big letdown performance last week. Okay, I mean that kind of soured some things from an Ole Miss fan perspective, but obviously Mississippi State's just not having a good year. So I mean that
State's been dreading today for 364 days since these transfer portal class started coming in and everything started to look a little bit different. They've been, this year has been the darkest timeline for Mississippi State.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I get why it's been different this week, but again, it's the Egg Bowl, and there's something that's not been really discussed as much. We did a couple stories on it earlier in the week, but I mean, this is Jeff Levy's return to Oxford a little bit. That's a storyline that not a lot of people are talking about because of how, Ole Miss's slim playoff hopes. That's kind of gotten the spotlight, and Mississippi State just has not been very good. So I don't think that people have really leaned into that. But that's something that's interesting to me today, because Jeff Levy had some good offenses in his 2 years in Oxford for sure.
Yes, we'll talk about that. Jeff Levy coming back to Oxford. We'll talk about Zach Arnett getting his revenge potentially against Mississippi State when we come back. This is the Locked On Ole Miss pregame show. Stick around. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets today with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. There's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but Game Time allows you to see exactly what that seat will look like before you buy the ticket. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, see Morgan Wallen, I guess, job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season coming to a close in Ole Miss history, we can help you get tickets as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, John, you mentioned that Jeff Levy is going to be returning to Oxford, and this is a big game, obviously, for Jeff for that reason. But Jeff Levy also had a lot of success against Pete Golding in that famous 2020 Ole Miss Alabama game. So there is a history of Jeff Levy having success against this defense. And that probably should not be overstated. Now, he did get a little bit better in 2021. He's seen it a couple of times, and obviously they're going against Tennessee and all that. But the history of Mississippi State having success leads you to think that State's going to be able to score at least a little bit today.
I think so, and we'll probably get into this at the end of the show maybe, but I think Ole Miss wins, but State covers today because 26.5 is a lot of points for an Egg Bowl to me. Like I just think that's a really large spread. I do have Ole Miss winning, but State covering. I do think State will be able to score a little bit today. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm kind of a fan of Michael Van Buren a little bit. Like I think he
looks like a young Matt Corral. He does look like
a
young Matt Corral back there.
Yeah, like I think he's got potential in this league for sure. Again, he's obviously a freshman and doesn't have just a ton around him, but I think that he's got potential. So I think that Levy will be able to scheme up some stuff today to get State some points at times today. I don't think it'll be enough to win, but I do think that he'll be able to do that today.
And the other side of the coin is Zach Arnett is an analyst. He is the best assistant linebacker coach in college football. He sits up in the press box. This means a lot for Zach Arnett, the way that everything went down in Starkville last year.
Oh, it does. I think anyway. I think it should. And I understand that State felt like it needed to make a coaching change. Last year was not going well at all for them. But I'm sure that Zach Arnett would like to come out on top in this thing today, even though he's not the head guy or a defensive coordinator or anything like that. But I do think that he would like to come out on top today against the school that let him go a season ago, for sure. I think that's definitely at play today. There's storylines like that, those two, Levy and Arnett, that just have not been talked about a lot this week, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning.
It's probably because of what Ole Miss did down in Florida and the fact that, honestly, Mississippi State season's been over for a while. Now, they're still going to play everything. The Ole Miss thing is if Mississippi State goes 1-11 and that one's against Ole Miss, it's a successful season. There's some truth there. There's a lot of truth there. So they're going to play hard, probably harder than they played all year. It's just a matter of if you allow them to be able to be close enough to where they can affect what's going on. Before we get to some viewer comments going on, predictions for this game. What do you think the score prediction is going to be in this football game?
I've got 38-17, something like that, kind of. I think that Ole Miss will be in control for the game. Now, I said this for last week against Florida too, so I mean, take this with a grain of salt. But
Yeah, we had the same
I,
score.
right, yes, but I do kind of feel, and I feel like it will be something in that range today because I do think State will score a little bit, but I think Ole Miss will just out talent Mississippi State today. I think Ole Miss is the better team. If a somewhat motivated Ole Miss team shows up, I think they should win today for
Yeah,
sure.
and the benefit of being the number 14 team in the college football playoff with even slim or a slim route to the playoffs means that you have a much better chance of having a motivated team, because there was a chance, a real chance that Mississippi State could have been up and it could have been a third or fourth quarter game because Ole Miss was just playing with their food, wanting to run out the clock. But this being 14 and having a chance to get to the playoffs, at least that provides the opportunity to be motivated.
I think it should, and it just depends on how well emotionally the locker room has bounced back from last week. I think you can look at this and say, yes, there's a shot that if you're an Ole Miss player, there's a shot that we can get into this thing. So, go out and play and try to dominate as much as you can. But on the flip side of that, I'm going to be interested to see that for sure, just because things were pretty disheartened last week in Gainesville when that final whistle sounded, and it, understandably so.
Yeah, it should have been, honestly. And if Ole Miss fans are looking at what they're trying to prepare this weekend for, Ole Miss needs a convincing win over Mississippi State. No conversation for the playoffs happens without a convincing win over Mississippi State. It just doesn't. But then you need Tennessee potentially to lose to Vandy, South Carolina to beat Clemson, but not by much. You need Auburn to beat Alabama. And at that point right there, you're borderline on getting into the tournament. And each one of those things, this is the crazy thing that I was explaining to people. Each one of those things, if you told me one of those things happened, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. The fact that Ole Miss needs all of those things is where the rub is.
That's why I think this is a rough spot for Ole Miss for sure, because it's almost like putting together a parlay in sports betting. Okay, you need all of these things to hit in order for you to win. Okay, and anybody who knows anything about sports betting knows that parlays, yeah, you get better odds for you. I mean, if it hits, it hits, right? But if just one thing misses, I mean, you lose the whole thing. So that's why I think this is a rough spot for Ole Miss, because they've got to dominate Mississippi State today. Like you said, Auburn needs to probably beat Alabama. South Carolina needs to beat Clemson, but not by a ton. Okay. And what was the other one? Maybe Vandy over Tennessee.
Vandy over
Like
Tennessee. Yeah. And then you have like
so,
Miami and Syracuse and other chaos that can happen outside. But the main thing is they need the ACC to only get one team in, and the SEC needs to clear out some teams in front of you.
yeah. So that's a lot that's got to happen. But I mean, what's in your control as Ole Miss today is beating Mississippi State, and that has to be the focus.
And my prediction of this game is actually 41-17. Whenever Ole Miss was at 14 and at least had a sliver of hope for the playoffs, I moved it from 31-17 to 41-17 because I think State's going to see a little bit more motivated team as well. Anyway, when we come back, we will switch gears a little bit and talk about Chris Beard and Ole Miss basketball's big win over BYU last night and them getting ready for Purdue today, this afternoon. Anyway, stick around. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's .1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Ole Miss is currently a 26.5-point favorite over the Mississippi State Bulldogs. That's the largest line in the history of this game, I think, by a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. So I am kind of worried after what happened in Florida, how Ole Miss is going to react today, and if they can get to that 26.5-point line. The FanDuel Sportsbook gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats and view the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today and join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get into basketball a little bit and take some comments towards the end of the broadcast. I enjoyed this basketball game yesterday. It was a really fun game to watch. Juju Murray absolutely took over the game in overtime, and he was unguardable essentially by BYU once they got into foul trouble, because that felt like it was BYU's scheme early in the game. It was make a bunch of three-point shots with their lottery pick, that Igor Dennis or whatever his name was, or Demon, Igor Demon was a top 5 lottery type pick on the floor, and they just wanted to shoot and get the lead and then strain you. And then Ole Miss just started chipping away, and BYU started fouling, and all of a sudden you looked up and their whole team was in foul trouble. And at that point, Juju Murray just like, if you foul me, I'm going to go to the line and make the free throw. And I don't think anybody can guard me, and there's nothing you can really do. And Ole Miss just kind of pulled away.
Yeah, it was that was a big win for Ole Miss yesterday, I think, for sure, because I mean that's a pretty good BYU team on a neutral floor, and you've got another big test today with Purdue. You've got a chance to have back-to-back pretty good
back-to-back quad ones probably.
Right. I mean, neutral floor wins here in the week of Thanksgiving, and I mean that can be really big, especially depending on what happens in conference play down the road. So that was a big one for Chris Beard and company yesterday, and going to overtime on Thanksgiving is pretty interesting in and of itself. But that's a big win for sure.
Yeah, and it was. Let's just be real about this too. There was one play in the game, and Ole Miss had the ball to go up 10 points. They had a chance to stretch it out to 10 points in the game, and there was a steal that BYU had and a quick score, and then he hit a quick three, and that made it a game again, for whatever it is. But it was really close from Ole Miss winning this thing and pulling away in regulation. It was just that quick little momentum bump that kind of bit them.
Yeah, for sure. And and college basketball a lot of times is a game of runs like that, and little things like that can be the difference in a win or a loss, or in this case something going into overtime. So today is a really big test for them too, for sure, because Purdue is a really good college basketball program. I mean, I guess we can just kind of go on and say that pretty bluntly. This is going to be a big test for them today in San Diego, because I mean, if they can get this one, I mean, that's a lot of momentum that you've got under your belt heading into December. And I know last year they went undefeated in non-conference play, but I mean the schedule was very different than it is this year, for sure. So I think you can really utilize momentum like that going into the back half of your non-conference slate, and then into SEC play.
Yeah, just a terrific win, and they just have an opportunity, a free shot, basically, against the Purdue Boilermakers today, and that should be pretty good. Anyway, let's get to the comments real quick before we get out of here in this pregame show. We have James Mendoza that just says, I hope we can keep all of our defensive coaches for next year. I was thinking about this, John. I think that Zach Arnett's probably going to be a one and done.
I think so, probably. I think he's been successful as a coordinator. I think he'll have job offers. I don't see him staying around for another year, probably. This is kind of like his not rehab stint, or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's his year to get back on his feet and get everything kind of situated again. I think he's going to be a coordinator sooner rather than later, once again.
Yeah, I think he would end up at a place like the rumor is that Florida is going to fire both their defensive coordinators this year, because we're going on. I could see Zach Arnett at Florida next year, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that would be a decent fit.
Yeah. Saints fan 04 says the season will be talked about for years from now. Yes, absolutely on that one.
I fully agree with that. I think that there's some parallels to multiple previous Ole Miss seasons with this, but if you look at it from like a preseason expectation thing, let's say Ole Miss doesn't get into the playoff, if you look at it from a preseason expectation standpoint, I see some parallels to '09 in this thing a little bit with how that team came into the year with a lot of a lot of expectations, and then had some had some bumps in the road, and obviously that year ended with an Egg Bowl loss. That's something that Ole Miss wants to avoid today, but I do see some parallels there for sure. Maybe '03 as well, a little bit.
The season that I correlated with wasn't even an Ole Miss season, but it reminds me a lot of the 1990 Michigan team that Ole Miss played in the Gator Bowl. That was the preseason number one, lost a 1-point game against Notre Dame, 1-point game against Iowa, and they lost a 3-point game to Michigan State. And all of a sudden they're in the Gator Bowl instead of having they were the best team in the country.
Yeah.
That year, but they just lost 3 games. And that was the team that had Desmond Howard on it, Elvis Gerback. That was those prime. I think it was Gary Moeller as the coach. That was after Bo Schembechler, but not much. But that Michigan team was very good. I think that correlates very well with Ole Miss. Randy Cross says Ole Miss by 50, literally. Yes, okay. 33 Drummer says, let's go Rebs, hotty toddy. Rebel and Dave Adventure says, yeah, Lane let us down. The Benchley situation is unforgivable. That's a weird situation. We'll never know the truth on that, John. There's rumors one way. There's stuff on one side saying one thing. It's I don't know that Ole Miss fans are ever going to hear this story.
I don't think so either, unless it's, years down the line. I don't see. It has been weird this year. Since week 1, it's been weird, and it's been something that, we've asked multiple times, and we have just not really gotten a straight answer on. So.
And from Tracy Ivy Muhammad, Miss Tracy, that's Jared Ivy's mom. She says, I'm still going to watch the show. There will be a few cheers today. Miss Tracy, we are going to miss you very much coming to the games and your presence around the football program. Unbelievably nice lady, all very good people. I am so proud that Jared's going to take that next step in his professional career, but we are going to miss you just on the show selfishly, you being around.
Well, and Jared has been a really good presence in that locker room too. He's obviously been an incredible player since he got to Ole Miss. But interviewing Jared Ivey too, it shows you how level-headed he is, and I think that's a presence that's really underrated in a locker room, especially on defense. And I think he's really been able to provide that. He's been a really good piece at Ole Miss.
Ray Duncan says, is Diggs available today? He's listed as questionable, as probably a game-time decision. We'll see exactly how it goes. I will say this. Mississippi State is bad defending the run. If Ulysses breaks a long touchdown, Ulysses Bentley IV breaks a long touchdown, that may be more problems than it's worth, honestly. The questions that's going to happen throughout the whole offseason. It would almost be better if Ulysses Bentley didn't play for Lane Kiffin today.
For storyline purposes, I guess. Yeah. But I would be interested to see what Logan Diggs looks like if he is able to go, for sure. Yeah. Because the last time we saw him was in an LSU uniform, right? So it's seeing him in an Ole Miss uniform will be different. I'd like to see what he's like in person.
Jason Carruthers says, so what's up with Deuce Knight? I don't know. We'll see if Deuce shows up at the game today. He is not showing up on the pre-list that like Zach Berry and all them put out on 3. But if Deuce Knight makes it to the game, Ole Miss has a chance. If Deuce Knight does not come to this Egg Bowl, Deuce Knight is not signing with Ole Miss. He's going to sign with Auburn.
Yeah. That's a battle that has been talked about for a long time. What he's going to end up doing. And in a lot of recruiting today, it's, you can get momentum one way and then it completely flips on its head. So, it is what it is, but we're getting kind of close to the nitty gritty here as far as, putting pen to paper. So, we'll just have to see if Ole Miss is able to make up what's left of that ground.
Yeah. And Caleb Cunningham having an official visit this weekend and signing day being Wednesday. That's big. That's huge. So whatever rumors that's going to happen, there's a good chance that he's going to be all right. And Caleb Cunningham and Caden Lee and Aiden Williams potentially And I know everybody's going to say it, but Deion Smith, those rumors keep popping back. They're going to try and get him back in January or something like that. If that happens, the wide receiver unit for Austin Simmons, it looks like there's not going to be that much of a step back in 2025.
Yeah, no, I think it should be pretty good if it stays healthy. I mean, you'll be losing Trey Harris for sure, but I mean that's it just kind of is what it is, and he's going to be difficult to replace.
Yeah.
But you should have still some pretty good pieces around Austin Simmons, assuming he is the guy, which it looks like he will be in 2025.
All right. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get those podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John Macon Gillespie, the publisher of Ole Miss on SI. What do you got going on Ole Miss on SI today, buddy?
Going to have a lot of in-game coverage up on the site. We're going to have our in-game updates like we usually do, and some post-game stuff rolling in. We're going to, have some basketball stuff too once all that stuff goes final. Yeah, I mean, today's going to be, it's weird doing it on a Friday, but it's going to be like our typical game day type stuff that we have going on over on the site.
Yeah, the media contingent that's controlling the narrative of what's going on does not like the game on Thanksgiving. I missed the game on Thanksgiving. I'll just say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Thanksgiving Ed Bowls sometimes stress me out because I'm trying to balance like family and covering stuff. But, I get it. Like now, to me, the issue with it being on Black Friday is high school football stuff. Because this is like North and South half this week, but just kind of is what it is.
All right, John, thank you very much. Be safe heading up to Oxford, and everybody else tune in about 30 to 45 minutes after the show for the instant overreaction. Remember, it is an instant overreaction, which means I'm going to be unbelievably elated or unbelievably deflated. It is a hyperbolic show by nature. So tune in for that, and we will give you all the news as well. But anyway, John, we'll talk to you later. Be safe heading up there, man.
All right. Thank you.